Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to True Healing and Recovery. Welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. Today, we're stepping in directly into yet another controversial conversation in addiction recovery. It's a conversation that I've experienced and seen that divides many churches, therapists, treatment centers, recovery programs, families, and recovering individuals themselves. I've seen it. And here's the question is powerful and emotional. Ready? Can someone truly heal without God? Or can faith alone overlook serious mental health needs? I think that's a great question. See, some people say all you need is Jesus. Others, you need therapy, trauma work, medication, structure, and science. Some people believe that recovery is spiritual warfare. Others believe recovery is a psychological healing and neurological repair, the two. And today we're not avoiding this conversation at all. We're not avoiding anything. What we're walking straight into it because honestly, I believe both sides contain truth. But I also believe people suffer when we become extreme on either side. Because addiction is not simple. It's not simple at all. People are battling trauma, depression, PTSD, self hatred, emotional survival, broken identities, right? And a spiritual emptiness. And if we oversimplify recovery, we risk hurting people who are desperately trying to survive, desperately trying to figure out how to change their lives. So today, right now, what are we talking about? We're going to talk about faith. We're going to talk about therapy, psychology, neuroscience, surrender, emotional healing, identity, right? We're going to talk about purpose and the real battle underneath addiction. All right, and before we begin, if these conversations are helping you heal, grow, or just think differently, do me a favor and subscribe to that channel. Hit that button because this is more than a podcast. This is a movement for people silently fighting battles that nobody sees. And somebody listening right now needs some hope. All right, so let's go. Let's rock and roll. Why does faith become so powerful in addiction recovery? Because addiction, ladies and gentlemen, destroys more than the body. I don't know if you really understand that. Addiction destroys any hope, identity, self-worth. It destroys relationships, meaning, purpose. Many addicts, recovering individuals, they don't just feel broken physically. They feel spiritually empty. They feel lost, hopeless, disconnected. And eventually, many people reach a moment where they realize, yo, I cannot save myself. And that's where surrendered happens or enters into their lives. See, Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, right, built much of its recovery philosophy around this very idea. Admitting powerlessness, surrendering to a higher power, right? A spiritual awakening, identity change. And for many people, faith changes everything. Why? Why is this? Because faith gives people a couple of things. Faith gives hope, right? You're in a faith-based community, forgiveness, meaning, accountability, purpose, identity renewal. Some people survive addictions medically, but are transformed spiritually. And if you've ever seen somebody who was completely broken suddenly become peaceful, loving, disciplined, humbled, and purposeful, you understand why people passionately believe in faith-based recovery. Some people literally say, God saved my life. And for them, that's not religion. That's reality. Now let's bring a little balance into this. Let's balance this honestly. Because while faith is powerful, some people in recovery have been deeply hurt by oversimplified spiritual advice. Church hurt. See, people struggling with PTSD, severe depression, panic attacks, bipolar disorder, deep trauma, they have sometimes been told things like, you just need more faith. You just need to pray harder. You're not trusting God enough. And that can be extremely dangerous because some mental health struggles are deeply psychological and neurological. Oh, now I'm tongue-tied. Neurological, excuse me. Trauma changes the brain. Trauma changes the brain, ladies and gentlemen. Depression affects thinking patterns. PTSD affects the nervous system. And while prayer matters and prayer is helpful and powerful, some people also need therapy, structure, trauma treatment, psychiatric support, the emotional regulation tools. See, ignoring mental health realities can harm folks if we're not careful. And this is where some clinical professionals become frustrated with extreme faith-only approaches. Because not every emotional issue is solved overnight through prayer alone. Some folks are really, really messed up. Sometimes healing is a process. And that process may include counseling, mentorship, medication, learning how to heal the nervous system, doing some trauma work. See, that doesn't mean God failed. It doesn't. It means healing is just layered. Now, let's talk about the clinical side of things. Let's talk about the clinical side of things, right? Clinical recovery focuses heavily on a couple of things. Evidence-based therapy. Evidence-based, right? Neuroscience, behavioral patterns, trauma processing, coping mechanisms, emotional regulation. And honestly, there's tremendous value in all of those things that we just spoke about. Because many of us, many recovering addicts and those that are still in active addiction were never taught how to regulate emotions. We were never taught how to process pain, how to communicate safely. We were never taught how to challenge destructive thinking. So therapy can become life-changing. Therapy can help teach people to challenge their distorted thoughts or to help people regulate overwhelming emotions. Trauma therapy helps people process wounds they buried for decades. Neuroscience helps explain why addiction becomes compulsive. See, all of that matters. And all of that is extremely helpful. Because think about this, some people spent years thinking that, man, I'm just weak. When in reality, their nervous system was trapped in survival mode. And this is important. This is important. I'm speaking from my own lived experience. Understanding the brain can reduce shame. And shame destroys people, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, clinical recovery absolutely helps many individuals heal. But here's why, or here's where controversy enters again. Because some people become clinically informed without becoming internally transformed. This is one of the deepest truths in recovery. Some people stop using the substance, but they still feel empty inside. They still feel lost. They still feel that they have no purpose. They still feel a spiritual disconnection. They still feel emotionally broken. And this is where faith-based recovery often speaks to something deeper. Because us human beings are not just brains. We are emotional human beings. We are spiritual. We have a spirit. We are relational human beings. We are identity-driven human beings, ladies and gentlemen. And many people eventually realize my addiction was connected to a deeper emptiness. That emptiness cannot always be solved by information alone. You can understand trauma intellectually. You can. And still feel hopeless emotionally. You can understand the neuroscience and still hate yourself internally. That's why some people in recovery eventually begin searching for purpose, for meaning, for forgiveness, for identity, for peace. And faith often becomes powerful right there. Because many people don't just need coping skills. They need hope. They need real hope. Yes, they do. I needed hope. I needed hope. See, clinical recovery was an absolute blessing in my life, but I still needed more, and I needed more hope. So let me speak personally for just a minute or two. I believe true healing requires honesty in all areas. I believe God, the one true living God, transforms lives. I've seen it. I've seen people completely broken. I've seen people suicidal. I've seen many of people addicted and hopeless. I've seen them how they suddenly begin changing from the inside out simply through faith. Not perfectly, but powerfully. I've seen surrendering to the one true living God create peace where chaos used to live. I've seen it because I've experienced it. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I experienced it. But I also believe that the one true living God can work through people. I believe that he can work through a therapist, through the counselors, through mentors, recovery coaches like myself, healthy communities, psychiatrists, excuse me. I believe that God can work through all of these people. And honestly, I think sometimes people become extreme because they're afraid. Some people fear psychology because they think it replaces God. Others reject spirituality because they fear manipulation or judgment. But maybe healing was never supposed to be, faith or clinical support. Maybe sometimes it's both. And before anybody gets angry, hear this clearly. Not every therapist understands spiritual emptiness, and not every church understands trauma. And that's real. Which is why people need wisdom, people need discernment, and balanced healing environments. Now, I want to make something very clear to each and every one of you, because I don't want you folks confused about where I stand in my faith. I am a believer in Jesus Christ. Not religion, not performance, not pretending to be perfect. I've surrendered my life and heart to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I repented. I got tired of running, tired of destruction, tired of trying to fill internal emptiness with external things. I gave my life to Christ, man. And now listen carefully. That doesn't mean that I think I'm better than anyone. What it does mean is I know how broken I was. I know the darkness. I know the addiction, the emotional pain. I know the shame. I know the self-destruction. And I also know what it felt like when God started changing me from the inside out. Didn't happen overnight. but it happened. Because for me personally, Jesus became more than a religion, or he is more than a religion for me. Jesus is my hope, my peace, my purpose, my forgiveness, my identity, my healing, my strength, my savior. And while other people may place their faith in different things, in science and self-help, in spirituality, the universe, psychology, or any other beliefs, I want to lovingly and boldly make it clear that my faith is in Jesus Christ, the Savior. This is my foundation. This is what carried me and continues to carry me. And honestly, I believe some people need more than information. Some people need transformation, not just behavior modification, but a heart transformation. Because I learned something powerful. You can remove the substance and still be spiritually empty. You can gain knowledge and still feel lost internally. And for me, Coach Mike, Jesus filled the emptiness I spent years trying to numb. Now, hear me clearly. That doesn't mean I reject therapy. It doesn't mean that I reject mental health support. That doesn't mean that I reject the clinical tools. I'm in a position where God opened the doors for me to be involved in this area. I have the utmost respect for therapy, for the mental health support, for the clinical tools that are provided for individuals. I am an MAT, intensive case manager. I love this. I'm a recovery coach. I jumped back into school to get my degree in psychology, not to become a therapist, but to understand how my body works, how my mind works, and how God orchestrated and created our minds. I believe that the one true living God works through people. I believe God can use any one of them, counselors, all of that. True healing ultimately begins, ladies and gentlemen, with surrender. And my surrender was and still is to Jesus Christ. That's my truth. That's my testimony. That's my faith. And I will never force that onto somebody. I'm not here to force none of that onto you. But I feel because of the topic, I need to share that. I'm never going to hide it. I'm not ashamed. Definitely not ashamed of what God has done in my life. He pulled me from the grave. And this is why I tell folks, you can find sobriety. You can recover. If you utilize the tools clinically, what's available, and utilize and learn how to cope and learn how to do it, it can happen. It will happen. With me, even doing so, there was an emptiness that I could not fill. And that was filled when I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Listen, there is still hope for you, ladies and gentlemen. No matter how addicted, no matter how broken, how angry, how ashamed, how lost you feel, God still restores people. I believe that with everything in me. And while recovery may involve some therapy, healing work, may involve some accountability, and definitely some emotional growth, for me personally, Jesus became the center of my transformation, and that changed everything for me. So let's go deeper. Let's go deeper than religion versus psychology. The real issue underneath addiction is identity. Many addicts internally believe I'm worthless, I'm broken, nobody loves me, I'll never change. Those beliefs shape behavior. And that's why recovery is not just behavior modification. It's identity reconstruction. And this is where both Faith and clinical recovery can help. Clinical recovery may help someone understand why they think destructively, while faith may help someone believe that they are still worthy of redemption. And that combination becomes powerful because information without hope can feel empty, and hope without emotional healing tools can feel unstable. We people need truth, healing, accountability, purpose, emotional growth, identity, renewal. That's why I say over and over again, addiction is not the primary problem. Addiction is the symptom. The real battle is identity, trauma, belief systems, emotional survival. And until those deeper issues heal, people will continue searching externally for relief internally. Let me say this directly. The recovery world spends too much time attacking each other. Faith groups attack therapy, therapists mocking spirituality, recovery communities dividing over ideology. Meanwhile, people are dying. Maybe instead of competing, we should focus on helping people heal. Because the addict sitting alone tonight doesn't care about the ideological wars. They care about surviving. They care about hope, peace, healing, freedom, purpose. And I think we need more humility in recovery conversations because nobody has ever answered perfectly. But healing absolutely is possible. And if somebody listening right now feels hopeless, please hear me carefully. Your story is not over. You're not too broken for healing, not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. So, coach, what does true healing actually look like? True healing looks like this: emotional honesty, accountability, surrender, growth, healing trauma, rebuilding identity, healthy thinking, learning peace, purpose, and spiritual renewal. It looks like someone becoming whole again. Not perfect, but whole. And whether someone begins through a church, through therapy, through a recovery meeting, counseling, coaching, or complete brokenness, what matters is that healing begins. And if this podcast is helping you think deeper, heal deeper, or fight harder for your future, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Subscribe to this channel because there are millions of people silently battling addiction, battling trauma, battling depression, and hopelessness. And together, we are going to keep exposing the real battle behind addiction. So, to the person listening right now, maybe you've prayed and still struggled. Maybe you've gone to therapy and still feel empty. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to heal. But hear me carefully. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. Healing may happen spiritually, emotionally, mentally, step by step, but healing is possible. It is. You are more than your addiction, your diagnosis, your trauma, your relapse. You're more than that. Your life still has value. Your future still matters. Your healing still matters. So welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. And remember, healing starts with today's decision. Another day, another blessing. Peace.